Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be. This is Firoz Manji from Daraja Press, and thanks for joining our show on organizing in the time of COVID-19. Today, we head off to India, a country which, as many of you know, has been facing increasing repression, a rise of what many people would call a neo-fascist government under Modi, who has been widely praised by the Western press and governments, and a growing repression against the Muslim communities of India. And a disenfranchisement of very large numbers of people, millions of people across India. In addition, then, under those circumstances, COVID-19 hits India as it has hit every country across the world. Uh, what has been its impact? What has been its impact in particular for small farmers, and what's their capacity to organize? And to discuss that, I've invited Afsar Jafri uh, from Grain. Grain is an extraordinary organization that uh, publishes and does research on a huge variety uh, of issues related to both the environment or productivity of land, organizing of farmers, and one of their most interesting latest research relates to the research showing that the industrial livestock production, not wet markets, provide the origins of COVID-19. And this evening, I will be talking to another person from India who was involved in that research. But in the meantime, I'm very pleased to introduce Afsar Jafri, who is also a member of staff member at Grain since last year, and is based currently in New Delhi. He told me that he was in the past worked with Vandana Shiva, and who's an extraordinary organizer, and also with the global focus on the global south, and has long experiences of working on agriculture and food policy, linked with farmer groups in India and in the region. So a very warm welcome to you, Afsar. It's really
Thank
nice to have you on the show. Um, so tell me, I mean, perhaps for the in the interest of our viewers, give me a sort of outline of what's happening in relation to COVID in India.
Yeah, in fact, in India, we got the first case of COVID sometime in mid of February. And then obviously it was a traveler coming from some international destination, and he brought it in India. But you can see in the same month in February, we also had, Trump visiting India, and he was in India for 2 days. And today, the number of cases in India of COVID-19 have almost crossed 30,000, and similarly, the number of fatalities is also increased to more than 1,000. So it has far-reaching impact on certain communities, especially farmers, on migrants, on dairy, and of course all the unorganized sector, because India has a huge unorganized sector, and they are really having a big trouble. And it's really a big trouble to also feed so many people in India, which is a big crisis, and government is doing a lot to help them out with different policies, interventions, as well as there are NGOs and other civil society groups have come forward to do their best, especially some of the groups, for example, like the gurudwaras, and then they are doing excellently well and providing food to hundreds and thousands of hungry people. So
Yes,
it's a really, really serious situation right now here.
the Sikh community has been doing that internationally. It's quite
Yeah.
impressive. The Gurdwaras everywhere have been supporting. You talk about the unorganized. Is this what the rest of it would call the informal sector?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, but in terms of government policy in relation to COVID, is this the standard approach of washing hands, using soap, some alcohol to clean your hands, and social distancing? Is that really the core of their policies?
Of course, that is there, which is kind of a precaution for those who are still safe. But government is also, they are trying to get the necessary supplies to deal with the COVID patient, and they have, also organized hospitals. But unfortunately, most of these, health facilities are available in urban areas. If you go to rural areas, if you go to especially the poor state or province in India, for example, Bihar or Jharkhand or Orissa, they probably don't have that kind of good facilities. And if those, the way, because India is in the third stage of community transmission, and if the COVID-19 have spread to the rural areas, it's going to be a big disaster. And the way people from different, especially migrant laborers from different urban areas have moved to those places, I think there are chances of community transmission in those areas are really high. So that is a serious concern for not only for the people of India, but also for the government, how to deal with if that situation comes up.
So let's look at two groups in particular, because there's I know an interchange between them. One is the small farmers, and the other is the migrant workers. To what extent have they been affected, and what's their conditions and under which they get infected?
In fact, if you look at the farmers, as you know, India, almost more than 60% of Indian population, which is around 800 million people, are directly or indirectly dependent on agriculture. Which also, and then there is another, I would say, 15 million people are dependent on dairy. And the migrant laborers are, I would say, they are not just migrant, they are also, some of them are also farmers. So they do farming, and then during the lean period they move to big cities to earn their living. And then this was the period March to April when they move back normally as well to their villages to do harvesting. And then during the harvest they get remuneration in the file in kind as well as in cash. So whatever they harvest, they get that as well. So that is the reason the labor move back to their home state. So for labor class, if they are stuck in urban areas, for example, there are a lot of labor class involved into construction sector. And when a building is being constructed, they live there. Their food is either provided by the constructor or is being organized by the labor themselves. And once everything is stopped, they have nothing to do except live without any food or any payment. So that is the reason a lot of migrant labor moved back. And this kind of situation not only arose in Delhi, but it came up in Mumbai, in Surat, in Gujarat. So a lot of labor class who live outside their home, in their home, they are in, and they started moving back. And in fact, in some of the cases, government provided, for example, transport facilities, but a large number of farm migrant labor, they moved on foot. They either moved on the highways or they, use the railway track to go back to their home. So for both farmers and labor, it's more or less a similar situation, because they are also farmers, and they have, once they go back to home, they have to harvest their crop, and there's no market, there's no buyers, and there's no labor as well to do the harvesting. So that is there are a lot of such problems which they are facing right now.
I mean, from my understanding, a very large proportion of people who work on building sites are women in India.
Yes.
So they face a very particular situation then in terms of their exposure to COVID, because they're all unemployed and stuck together.
Yes.
So you see a migration back to land. So in other words, the government allows people to move.
No, I won't say government allowed it, but people, when this happened when the first, I would say, the deadline of the first, lockdown situation finished, and then the announcement came for the next one, for another, from another lockdown. So the labor class, they assembled in different big cities. They thought now the government will organize some travel for them to go back. And though government provided, in some of the provincial government provided some support in the form of travel support. They organized buses, but most of them, they didn't do anything, and then they are on their own. So there was no, government support, but government did not, I would say, triggered it. It was basically the people, the labor class, who wanted to go back home, and that is why they all got assembled in huge numbers in different cities.
So let's look at, help us understand what kind of organizing goes on, both amongst labor and amongst small farmers.
Especially if you look at the small farmers, their current problem is basically they have, in some of the farmers, the crop is standing in the field, so they need to harvest, or they need to, and for harvesting, if it is a huge, field, for example, if more than 2-3 acres, then, and if monoculture, for it's only wheat, then in the normal situation, if those farmers who can afford, combined harvester, then the combined harvester come from Punjab normally, because the Punjabis have got a large amount of combined harvester, and they, take it to Madhya Pradesh, they take it to Uttar Pradesh and other areas in Rajasthan for harvesting of crop, and they charge for it. But because of the lockdown and then no movement of traffic, the no harvester came to these areas, so the harvesting got stopped. But then farmers started organizing themselves, and they started doing some kind of, I would say, mutual or collective harvesting. And then few farmers came in, and then they started harvesting one family's crop, and then all of them moved to the other family's field, and they started doing that. So that is the way the farmers started organizing themselves. There are several such examples. I would say these are the food sovereignty responses to the corona crisis. One of them, in some areas, it's also very interesting to look at how farmers started doing, using the social media to not only to express their, frustration and anger because they have not able to harvest their crop, but they are also very, very, very much, frustrated because there's no buyer at all. And in some areas, for example, there is a farmer called Kanyan from Tamil Nadu. He put a video of 15-20 seconds on Twitter, which was seen by more than 400,000 people. And he started, and basically he told that there is no buyer for his crop, and he has got cabbage and tomato. And despite so many people who saw his video, some came forward including an MP from Bangalore and some of the companies, but he has so far only managed to sell 60% of his produce, and he has hardly 3 to 4 acres of farm. So even and the interesting thing is, after his story got in public, a lot of farmers, I mean, from UP and other places, they started joining Twitter. So that's a good story, because a lot of farmers, especially the young ones, are now into Twitter, and they are trying to express their frustration, their anger on the things, when the things are not moving, when there are no buyers, because government was supposed to organize procurement, because as you know, in India, the most of the procurement of rice and wheat happens by the government, and they procure it for the food security program. And that procurement are not happening in several provinces. It's happening in Punjab, fortunately, and in fact, they have managed to procure 40% of their, of their target. But in other states, in other provinces, that procurement is not happening. So that their farmers are able to express their anger and their frustration through these kind of social media, whether it's Twitter or Instagram or or Facebook. So at least the social media has come quite in handy for these farmers to not only express their anger, but also tell the public that they have so much of produce. For example, there is a case from Karnataka where the farmers are telling their followers that I have so much quantity of these vegetables and these fruits, and then he's trying to sell through Twitter. So that way, I think with the with the Kanyan case, a lot of farmers are trying to use these kind of social media to sell their produce.
But in this situation of lockdown, do you anticipate that there's going to be a problem of food distribution? Do you see this culminating in some crisis down the line?
It is already happening, in fact, because of the lockdown, and then there is no traffic movement, and some of these states, provinces have blocked their border. So if the truck who is moving with the supplies, if they don't have passes, then the trucks are not being allowed. And there are also cases of corruption where the policemen at the border are demanding money to let the truck pass through the border going to the other province. So because of this situation, there is a serious crisis emerging for necessary supplies, especially for vegetables and and fruits. So and there are farmers, in fact, because I'm in touch with several of them, and they are telling us that they have so much. For example, the farmer in Maharashtra, they have pomegranate, they have grapes, they have papaya, they have all other fruits of the season, and they're not getting market. So the prices have really crashed down. The pomegranate, which normally I buy in Delhi, is selling at 150 and 170 rupees a kg. Those farmers are able to sell only 40 rupees or 30 rupees a kg. Banana is selling at 2 rupees a piece. Similarly, the grapes are selling at 2-3 rupees a kilo because it's very perishable crop. So depending on the crop, the farmers, I mean, those are very, very perishable crop. They're not getting a good market. I mean, Kanyan, despite his Twitter action, he could not get even the break-even price for his produce. He got only 3 rupees or less than 3 rupees a kg for his cabbage, which normally in Delhi is selling at 40 rupees a kg. So this, this is a big issue. And in fact, because of the lockdown, the farmers are not able to sell. There's the traders. Normally, the traders are not going to go to the farmer's place to pick up the produce. And even if farmers manage to, find a buyer, then it's organized. It's a very big. In fact, there are reports that the transport agencies, they are saying, we have trucks, but we don't have drivers, because drivers, especially because the COVID has really spread into the cities, in the urban areas, in metros, they are very hesitant to take their truck to the big cities because they are, afraid of getting COVID. So these are the some of the issues which are really creating some kind of food crisis in cities.
Um, India has been negotiating with the US in terms of facilitating transnational corporations to operate in India. To what extent have their operations had an impact on farmers and the economy?
In fact, the US for a long time was trying to get into the Indian market. And since they have huge production of some of the commodities, especially like dairy products, they have corn and soya bean and cotton, and they're looking for market. And in fact, when Mr. Trump came into India, he said, we are going to sign a limited deal, a mini FTA, free trade agreement with India very soon. And a larger deal will follow maybe post the US election in 2019, end of 2019. So this deal, they are probably trying to get a market for around 15 to 20 billion dollar, especially in agriculture sector. So US is trying to get market for its dairy product, its poultry, because India has already lost a case in the WTO, and US has got huge storage of especially chicken legs. So US is trying to send the chicken legs to India, and especially in this crisis with in COVID, we have a huge chicken crisis as well, because there was some news, and in fact the FTA, sorry, WhatsApp University have spread the rumor that if you eat chicken you'll get corona. So because of that, people are not eating chicken and meat. So the poultry industry is already quite hit in India right now, and the chicken prices, in fact, a few days back has dropped down to around 30 or 50 rupees a kg. The egg prices have gone down to 3 or 4 rupees a piece. Earlier it was 8 and 9, 7 or 8 rupees a piece, and the chicken prices was almost 150 rupees a kg. So because of the corona, the poultry industry is already in crisis, and so US want to capture the poultry market in India. Then they also want to bring their corn and soya bean and cotton. But the problem is, in India we already have a huge number of farmers who grow cotton, who grow soya bean, who grow corn, and because of that, if these things come from US, and they are, as you know, US provide huge subsidies to their farmers, including to their dairy industries. So if these subsidized products enter into India, it's going to be another big, huge crisis for the farming sector, and they will be really, hit a lot if India signed this limited FTA with US.
But presumably that has been delayed because of the COVID crisis.
Yes.
But what you're saying to us is that there's a large number of farmers who, in the season of harvesting and so on, are going to be impoverished because they can't sell their products. And you mentioned that there was some cooperation between farmers in terms of picking up the harvest, to collaborate on that. Do you see this leading to any organizing to make those demands on the state, or to create alternative methods of ensuring that people around them can at least eat?
Yeah, it is difficult to say if that will lead to any government, policy on that. But so far as the farmers' unions are concerned, they are really taking up these issues on a serious basis. For example, there is a farmer organization in Karnataka called Karnataka Rajya Raita Sangh, and when this COVID, the situation started, and farmer, and there was a lockdown, and those farmers in Karnataka were not able to sell their produce, then or at least as I said in the beginning, some farmers are also into monocropping, and so they started doing barter system. And suppose if one farmer has got in a surplus amount of rice or some surplus amount of some other grain, then they started exchanging with other farmers. So that was a very, very good example of how farmers innovate these ways to deal with this kind of situation. Then similarly, in some of the areas, the communities have started some kind of a community kitchen to deal with this situation, and they are, and the women have come forward to do the community kitchen thing. So these are other examples where farmers are really, evolving to deal with this situation, but I don't think that the government will come forward with a concrete policy to promote this kind of food sovereignty responses. I think like everywhere, Indian government is also very, very pro capitalism, and they are in fact they have come out with a kind of policies which are very export driven and not food sovereignty driven, like we see the government in Nepal, which have a policy for food sovereignty, but India has more, they want more and more exports. So they are going for a monoculture, monoculture farming. So they are probably doing a lot of and that is another issue I would like to also highlight here, because in the current situation, a lot of farmers are facing the food crisis because the kind of food they grow sometimes is only for export. For example, those farmers in Bihar, which is a very, very poor state, and they have no, I mean, the development level is very low in that compared to Gujarat or Maharashtra. They are growing corn, and that corn is not for human consumption. That is only for export purposes, which is used as for animal feed. And because of the corona, they are not able to sell their produce, and they don't have anything else except corn. So that is, I mean, this neoliberal model of agriculture or green revolution model of agriculture is another big issue. The farmers in India, in some areas, I'm not saying everywhere, but in some of the areas, they are facing another big crisis of food security, because they don't have any food crop in their field except those which they can only sell as for export.
One of the things you mentioned about the so-called green revolution has led to a huge number of farmers committing suicide. Do you see that's now going to be something really serious happening in areas broader than that?
Oh yes, it's already started happening. In fact, there are news from Karnataka, from Maharashtra, and here because I have did a lot of study on farmer suicides. If you look at from 97 onwards, in fact, I did my first study on farmer suicide in 97, where in one district, more than 500 farmers committed suicide because they have all growing one crop. And they're not even different varieties or diversity of that crop, but just one crop and one variety. But in this situation, the reason for farmer suicide is different. Normally, if you look at the largest number of farmer suicide has been reported in last so many years for Maharashtra, and Maharashtra because they grow mostly the BT cotton. And BT cotton requires a lot of water, and it requires a lot of investment. So the farmers who grow BT cotton, they normally go into debt, and then they commit suicide because they're not able to pay their debt. But today, the reports which are coming in for farmer suicides are mainly because they are not able to harvest their crop, or they're not able to find a buyer for their crop, and and their crops are getting rotten in the field. So the farmers are committing suicide, and I think this will definitely, as you rightly said, it will increase the number of farmer suicide, because those farmers who are committing suicide because of the green revolution situation and because of the green revolution technologies, that is will be there. But these farmers who are committing suicide because of the marketing situation, they will add up to those. So the in coming months, the number of farmer suicides are going to definitely increase. But unfortunately, because of a lot of criticism of the farmer suicide, the government of India did not, brought out the report which shows the number of farmer suicide who had committed suicide in 2017. The latest report came out in 2018, which also shows that in 2018, the farmers who committed suicide because of the agriculture issues have gone up more than 10,000. So 10,000 farmers, so almost two farmer every day committed suicide in India.
This is shocking because this
Every
is
hour,
on
right? Every hour, yes.
because on top of that there is this increasing mortality from coronavirus,
Right.
and so small farmers face a very sounds like a very serious situation down the road, as well as generally speaking, because food is going to be wasted. And but does this create the conditions? I mean, you mentioned about some level of cooperation in harvesting, but do you think that there is a potential emergence of cooperatives, a growth of that movement, which depends not on sorry, not on the state, but on people self-organizing?
Yes, in fact, thanks for raising this. In fact, there are reports which shows that India has also a system of farmers called you know uh, farmers cooperative kind of thing, or and they are in fact come forward to do the marketing, or at least to procure some of the farmers produce, and that is doing very well in some of the states. For example, in Karnataka, some of the farmers market have come up, and in fact they are procuring. But unfortunately, the two things which government should immediately start is they should start the farmers market at the village level, as well as the farmers market at the city level. If that happens, then we will be able to at least mitigate some of these farmers issue, especially the marketing issue is concerned. But the cooperative, but one group of people, one sector which is really still hit a lot is the dairy sector, where the cooperative is doing excellently well. In fact, as you know, the Indian dairy cooperative are really in almost every state they are operating. And for example, Amul is one of them, and each state has got its own dairy cooperative, and they are really hit because of the lockdown. And they are very much organized, but because of the lockdown, probably they are not able to sell their. I mean, at least the collection center maybe are not working well. And then there are also unorganized dairy farmers who do the home delivery, which we call doodhwalas. They are not doing well because of the lockdown. They are not able to go to their customers. But farmers cooperative or producers cooperative are now coming up in some of the estates, and they are trying to deal with this situation.
To what extent are these kind of changes, the emergence of these cooperatives and so on, to what extent are we likely to see this as as a permanent thing. In other words, it's not merely a transient response to the current situation of COVID, but one which may lay the basis for a more permanent, more equitable way of organizing. Or am I being romantic?
No, in fact, it is not that. In fact, there was a study done by the Joshi Adhikari Research Institute, where I was also one of the contributor when I was with focus on the global south, and that study basically talks about collective farming as a solution, because India solution to the agrarian crisis in India. And the government should take up really this collective farming of cooperative farming seriously. In fact, and one example which government has really brought out in the form of policy intervention is the farmers producers, FPOs, farmer producers organizations. This is one thing which government has, but there are other voluntarily sector. For example, there are number of cooperatives operating in Kerala, in Karnataka. But I am not very sure to what extent the government will bring out a policy to promote these kind of cooperative, especially given this kind of experience in this COVID situation. That each and every state should have this kind of, because right now not every state have very vibrant and cooperative which are operational, except in some states, for example in Kerala.
Kerala has a reputation for being a much more supportive state in relation to farmers and to workers. Are they facing a situation different from what the rest of the country is facing? Are farmers better protected? Are we seeing less economic crisis in Kerala than we are seeing elsewhere? Kerala has this reputation of being a healthy community, a healthy state, in many cases healthier than you'll find in some parts of New York.
Yeah, in fact, Kerala is doing very well. In fact, they are I would say, the first state who really started organizing to deal with this corona crisis. And in fact, the example of community kitchen I gave you earlier, that is also from Kerala, where some is the government initiative and some are the people's initiative, where women have come forward to do the community kitchen and providing food to the needy. But Kerala is going to face one, especially so far as the food is concerned, is because Kerala, they don't grow too much of staple food, and they are dependent on some other states, especially Punjab, Haryana, and other states for their staple foods, especially some of the grains and all that. So that crisis probably, if this continues for another 2 to 3 months, then Kerala might be facing this big crisis. Otherwise, I think Kerala is doing very well. And in fact, compared to other parts of India, Kerala managed to do it very well, managed to face this crisis very well, because the number of literacy rate in Kerala is much, much higher compared to other parts of the country. So they are doing excellently well.
So how do you see the future in the next 6 months to a year? Are we going to see a really growing crisis developing in India, combined with both COVID itself and the economic consequences on farmers who are locked down and unable to move?
In fact, this is a big lesson for a country like India, especially because in the food sector, in the agriculture sector, it is going to go into a big crisis if we fail to take proper measures to basically change or tweak some policy decision, especially in relation to the food and agriculture. As I said earlier, India policy is mostly agriculture policy is mostly driven towards exports right now. And if we have this kind of policy, and if we don't, and especially we are also doing a lot of monoculturing, the time has really come when in a country like India, which is so diverse, and we have such a diverse agriculture and biodiversity, we need to promote that at the policy level, and we need to strictly make sure that farmers who have even tiny amount of land, they should go for diverse kind of food culture instead of going for monoculture, because that can only save a country like this. Because as I said, there are hundreds and thousands of farmers who are facing food crisis because whatever they grow is not for their own consumption. So that is one crisis and one policy intervention which government can do. The second crisis, of course, is that a lot of hate atmosphere has developed in India, especially against certain communities, especially minorities, and that is creating a big problem for those who are into, especially for the community people, as well as if they are into some kind of a profession. For example, there are several cases which has come up in India where people are not, the majority community are not allowing a vendor from a minority community to come into their localities. And there are also reports where the member of legislature have come out clearly and saying that the Hindus should not buy anything from the Muslims. So that is another big crisis. If government doesn't take proper action on this, it can emerge into a serious communal issue in India. This is the second big crisis I see. If government intervention is very, it's not there, and it's very minimal. Then we also see if this continues, COVID crisis continues for another 3 to 4 months, there going to be a huge issue for jobs, because all those farmers who have moved back to their or migrants who have moved back to their villages, if they don't find a job there, what they're going to do? Because obviously, if there are masons or if there are other laborers, they may not find that kind of a job in their own home state or home village. They have to move back. So if we don't have proper transportation, if the economic activity is not happening for another 2 to 3 months, then there will be a serious issue for jobs, and people, they'll maybe, I don't know what I should say here, but it will create a big problem, especially in those states which doesn't have that kind of a development activity going on right now. For example, like Bihar or Jharkhand or Orissa, where most of the migrants come from.
Yeah, you're right. It does seem to be some really serious potential outcomes of the current situation, where there's this conflagration of all the different components that we've been talking about, of a dictatorial regime, the communal crisis, the COVID crisis, the economic problems that the farmers face. And that is certainly something that we will have to keep a watch out for. But also, as Arundhati Roy points out, that crises like this opens up opportunities, potentials for the birth of another way of organizing, another way of creating a just world today, rather than just. In other words, I think I'd be very interested to see how farmers' cooperatives, how their independent organizing, independent of the state, develops, because it seems to me that's where the hope lies. but it's been very interesting talking to you, Afsar. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you'd like to say any final words to our audience.
Yeah, I think one issue which I really forgot to bring about is the, as you talked about future. I mean, another big issue which we might face is the crisis for seeds or fertilizers, or because a lot of farmers are still doing green revolution technology agriculture, based very much dependent on seed, the hybrid seeds of fertilizer and pesticide. So that will create another big, if government doesn't come forward with proper solution. And that is why we in grain, or when we talk with or with via Campesina, because we work very closely with them, we try to promote agroecology, because that is, I believe, is the right situation where it not only supports the food requirement of the family, but it also look at the food requirement of the village or the community we live with, because and then it's quite sustainable without any poison and all. So that is another issue which government need to look at very seriously to promote as a response, as a lesson learned, because now as you rightly said, we need a shift, and that shift is possible if we move away from the green revolution top technology towards the more sustainable holistic agriculture, and that can be the future. And I think it's a very right time to get lesson and move forward through policy directions.
Clearly, that needs to be done. I perhaps have less faith in your government's willingness to do that, given its relationship with neoliberalism and with transnational corporations. I think independent organizing is probably going to find the way. And But I want to thank you very much for being with us today, and your contributions to this discussion. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Frozen. Thanks a lot for this opportunity.
Okay, we will catch up again later this year, perhaps to catch up on uh, what new seeds of emergence of another world are possible in this crisis. So thank you for being on the show.
Thanks a lot.
That was Afsar Jafri speaking about the condition of farmers in India. Um, Today we have well and today we have Amrit Wilson, who will be speaking to us in a few hours about the situation of gender and racism in the UK. And then later tonight, well, if for Indonesia it'll be early morning, we'll be speaking with Kartini Samon in Indonesia about how farmers are organizing there. But in the meantime, I wish you a good day, good evening, good afternoon, whichever, depending where you are. And thank you for joining us on Organizing in the Time of COVID. This is Firoz Manji from Daraja Press signing off today.